Thank you. So, I actually teach blockchain at Duke University, and I've done it for a while. And let me kind of describe my experience. So, the first time I taught, I had 13 students. The second time I taught, I had about 70 students. The third time, I hit the maximum for a section at the business school, and they decided to award me a second section in 2018. That was sold out almost immediately, so I had to do a third. So I'm in the situation where over half of the graduating class of 2018 at the business school was trained in blockchain. This enrollment probably is not random if you overlay the price of Bitcoin. And interestingly, the price of Bitcoin was $7,000 at the enrollment point. So essentially, the same thing is happening in the classroom that's happening in the market. And the theme of what I'm going to talk about is the Wild West of ICOs. So let me describe to you what I mean. I am approached all the time in terms of people reaching out, trying to get some insight from me as to whether I be an advisor, or give free advice to some sort of ICO or a token offering. So what I'd like to do is to kind of go through my experience with this, and at the end, I've developed a checklist of the sort of things that I ask when I look at a company that is thinking of doing an ICO. So that's kind of the plan of my presentation. So the first thing I'd like to talk about is the idea of bandwagon investors. We've seen the price of cryptocurrencies go crazy. And this is a graph of Bitcoin to its peak, over $19,000. And many of us, and many of you, shaking your head, wondering what's going to go on next. And it seemed to me that this was a great example of a bandwagon situation. So initially, we had people investing in cryptocurrencies that actually took some time to understand the foundation of the cryptocurrencies and came to a realization that this was something that was a good economic idea and worthy of investing in. However, there's a new class of investors that came in, and a very large number of speculators that were buying as the price went up. We saw the Coinbase wallets go to like 23 million Coinbase wallets. So Schwab, the largest kind of broker in the US, has got 12 million clients, and Coinbase 23 million. So there was a surge of people that came in, and with this bandwagon, as I call it, bandwagon is not really my sort of terminology. It's Warren Buffett's. So let me read to you what he said. The rising price has on its own generated additional buying enthusiasm, attracting purchasers who see the rise as validating an investment thesis. As bandwagon investors join any party, they create their own truth for a while. Okay, so what's interesting here is Buffett is not talking about Bitcoin. He's talking about gold. And this statement was made in 2012. It's kind of interesting to look at gold in 2012. Doesn't that look familiar? It's almost identical to what I just showed you. So when the party ends, and essentially, just to get the intuition here, these type of investors buy as prices go up. It's exactly the opposite to what I teach. So when I teach investment, the idea is to buy low and sell high, right? Not buy high and sell low. Okay, so these investors are not very skilled. They're speculating. this is gold, and we know what happened to gold, and we know what happened to Bitcoin. It's kind of remarkable sort of similarity in terms of the graph. Okay, so it's the same situation where you get some speculators into the market, buying, they create their own momentum, and then we know how it actually turns out. So that's the first thing. So the second thing is essentially, I believe that it's not just the speculators that are driving the price up. As a result of the price going up so dramatically, a lot of people are drawn in to start a company in this space that's really hyped and really hot. Okay, so, and it's remarkable to talk to people, some people in this space, where I can go to a conference, not this conference of course, but another conference that might have a blockchain session, and you've got a panel with many people up on the panel, so-called experts in blockchain, because their company has got a blockchain initiative. And what's shocking to me is that many of these investors don't even know the difference between a coin and a token. It's a pretty basic sort of distinction, and kind of like first lecture material in my course. So I characterize this as the Wild West, and indeed, there were initial token offerings in the Wild West, as I've reproduced below. Okay, so let me talk about some of the issues that arise in terms of when there's this euphoria, people coming into the market. Basically, it attracts people that, in terms of the Wild West analogy, are selling snake oil. Snake oil is supposed to cure everything, and people basically saying, give us your money, and there's nothing there. All they care about is the inflow of money. So this is a good example. This was unraveling during my course, and it's the BCC coin. So this is a coin that was launched in January 2017, and with extraordinary claim that if you converted your Bitcoin to BCC, that you could earn up to 120% a year. So the idea basically was that they would lend it out, and somebody would be paying 120%. So it had the full schedule of what you could earn, and it was a declining schedule through December 2019. And notice, even the 3 months that end in December 2019, they're promising a 10% return, which is an extraordinary return. So on the stock market, historically, to get 4% above a treasury bill is about the average. They're offering 10%, and initially 60% or 10% per month. And again, the basic idea is you send them the Bitcoin, they will exchange it into their token, and then be paying you a little more. And the sort of terminology that they were using was very confusing to anybody in finance. So what they essentially were doing, supposedly, was lending these funds out, but they characterized it as volatility software interest. And this is the schedule. I have no idea what volatility software interest actually is. And they're just red flags all over the place. Look at the lending amounts here, like $100 to $1,000. Then it jumps to 1,010 to 5,000. So what if it's like $1,005 is not covered by this? This is really, it seems like an amateur operation, but the coin goes to $437. Which very substantial. So these people are making money like crazy. And of course, the biggest red flag was that you got some free BCC if you encouraged a friend to join and to translate some Bitcoin into BCC. So it turns out that in January of 2018, both Texas and North Carolina regulators came in and basically accused BitConnect of running a Ponzi scheme. And almost immediately, the coin drops from $400 to about $18. Okay, so it's interesting. We are in North Carolina, and the North Carolina regulators were very aggressive on this, and I think did the right thing. So the BitConnect people didn't stop. So they had to close their exchange, but then they sent out this note basically saying that even though the coin is trading at $18, that they provided this additional offer to the public, and not all the public. You had to be outside of the US, where there's going to be a new ICO, and the ICO of BCC, they will sell you for only $150 a coin, even though the coin is $18. So again, they back off the US because they know they're in trouble in the US, and try to get people to buy at $150 even though the price is $18. So obviously that did not work either, and you can see what happened. So essentially the coin is worth zero. This is an example that was unfolding in my course. We're talking about it, then North Carolina actually shut them down. My course is actually a difficult course to teach because stuff happens in real time. So it's not just BCC. We see this all over the place. So this is a story in the Wall Street Journal that basically looks at red flags in initial public offerings. And they flagged a lot. So they found 121 projects that didn't name a single employee. They found 24 that were offering financial rewards without risk. And that is the ultimate red flag. The SEC is going to close you down if you don't register. If you're offering a reward like that, it's definitely a security. They also found that there's a market for freelancers to write the white paper that's associated with the ICO. And some of these freelancers were paid as little as $100 to produce a white paper. And finally, and this is for me the most interesting, even if the employee's name was listed, it might be a fake name. So they featured this particular, this is Premium Trade, and the person is identified as Ida Cohen, who has, quote, an experienced entrepreneur. But it turns out that Ida Cohen is just an invention. This is a stock picture of a guy called Eduardo Carrillo, and he's all over the internet. Okay, so he basically grabbed, the picture's grabbed, put in there a fake name, and this is essentially what we face in this market, and it's very difficult to deal with because with the bandwagon investors, even if there's a lot of red flags for people like us, the bandwagon investors might put their money into this initial coin offering because they think it's going to go up by a factor of 100. Okay, so I think that we need more discipline in terms of evaluating these ICOs, and I put together kind of a list of things. So let me go through them. This is very much an in-progress sort of exercise. So I use this framework in my course. In my course, almost all of the grade is dependent upon a group project where the students pitch a new idea that's based upon blockchain technology. So we have multiple meetings about this idea, and they produce a pitch deck, and that's what they're graded on for about 60% of the course. And let me also mention, another large chunk of the course is an individual assignment where the students need to deploy a smart contract to the Ethereum blockchain and send a transaction to it. So this is not just a course that talks about ideas, it's also a very technical course. So this is the framework that I'm working with. Let me go through it. So the first category, and there's 6 categories. The first category is the idea. So basic questions, like what problem is being solved? This is the first question that you definitely ask anybody who's pitching an idea to you. The second thing is the problem's got to be important. So there's lots of problems out there that can be solved, but the problem is trivial. So is the problem economically important? Number 3, does the market for this product already exist, or do you need to create a new market? And to create a new market is much more difficult to actually do. Number 4 is about the current situation. And in particular, I ask about the nature of the middle people. So usually a blockchain technology disrupts the middle people through peer-to-peer technology or the injection of a much lighter layer of middle people. So the question is, how thick is that layer? And what is the possibility of strong resistance? For example, there's a lot of middle people in, for example, digital music. It's a huge layer of middle people, making it very difficult to disrupt that space. With blockchain, given the vested interests of the middle people that are already in there. So the 5th thing is the advantage of the product. So is the advantage of the product sufficient that there's enough room to actually make money or to be profitable on it? And the final question I've got is this a social idea? Okay, so with the social idea, often it involves large-scale adoption. It involves a very large marketing spend initially to get the scale, the social scale. It makes it much more difficult to actually pull off. The second category is technology. Is there a white paper? Is it a serious white paper? Did the team actually write the white paper, or did they contract it out? Number 2, they're offering a technical solution, but is there a better technical solution? So number 3 is blockchain even necessary for the actual product idea, or efficient? Okay, so it's possible that the same product could be launched with a regular currency or regular database tools. How important is it to the product that blockchain is being used, or is blockchain just being used, dropped in, to take advantage of the hype around blockchain? So number 4 is the feasibility of the solution. So does it rely upon technology that's available today, or does something have to happen in terms of technological advance for the product to be viable? Because that's very important in terms of assessing the viability of the product. So the third category are blockchain specific. So is this a coin or a token? And indeed, I always ask to figure out whether the entrepreneur actually understands the difference between the two. So is it the appropriate choice? Could they just use one of the mainstream currencies like Bitcoin or Ethereum? So what is the reason to have your own coin? So is the implementation of the blockchain technology appropriate to solve the particular problem? If they're using a token, what is the token? What is the protocol that they're actually using? If it's a coin, ask about the monetary policy. What are the incentives to run nodes, and what is the distribution going to look like? In particular, I always ask about what the management is actually holding back. And finally, if this is a permission ledger, I need to know very clearly what the security protocols are for the nodes. So number 4 is the team. So basic questions here that essentially arise with any new venture. So this has nothing to do with a blockchain venture. This has to do with a venture period. and that is the experience of the management team. So do they have a track record in launching a business? And I actually want to know more details about what happened with the previous business. Was it a failure? And I'm okay with that because most fail. The key thing is, what do you learn from that actual failure? So that's part of the due diligence. So number two, does the management even understand blockchain technology? And that's fairly easy. With a few questions, I can determine pretty accurately if they are just BSing about blockchain or they actually understand what's going on. Number three, does management have the technical expertise to design the blockchain technology? So do they even have a development team or a single developer in place? I've seen plenty of people with a basic idea that don't have a single developer yet. They say, well, we're going to contract it out, or we're looking to hire somebody. That's a red flag to me. Number five is their key person risk. So if one of the management team or developers leave, does that provide risk in terms of the launch of the actual company? I usually ask about advisors and who they are, and they might be actually contacted to see if they're really the advisors. And then finally, and this is fairly easy to do, I look at the marketing materials, and if I think that the marketing materials are exaggerated or even deceptive, or if they are guilty of hyping, then that is a severe red flag for me. Okay, the last two categories. Number five is execution. So how are they going to fund this venture? So is it an ICO? Is it a private capital raise? And do they plan to do perhaps an airdrop? I want to know the details about that. Number two is increasingly important. So this was not as important a couple of years ago, but it is increasingly important. We need to understand the legal or regulatory risk associated with the ICO. So it's fairly easy to determine whether the ICO qualifies as a security. So that should be done. That's Law 101. It's very basic. And another kind of related question, do they plan to launch the ICO in the US, where the regulatory environment is much more onerous? Number three, does the business require a money transfer license? And as you know, that can be a real pain to get in the US, having to deal with all 50 states. Has there been a pre-sale? And what is the motivation for the pre-sale? And finally, and again, this is a question for all venture proposals, do they have initial backing? And who is the backer or groups of backers? I want to know about that. So number six, and this is really my last slide, is the upside. And I sometimes call that convexity in finance. So you're always looking for the upside. And the reason is fairly simple, that 90% of new ventures fail. And venture capitalists will invest in many ventures, not just one, because they know that 90% will fail. But they're looking for the 10%. The 10% to do really well. They're looking for the next Google. Okay, so it is crucial that, given you're faced with this possibility, this large possibility of failure, that there's got to be some upside. You need to be able to tell a credible economic story about the upside. And that upside might be the scalability of the product. I want to know a realistic view of the share of the market. And this idea of applying not the idea that is being proposed, but a similar idea in a different application. And that provides some upside. And even if the probability of success is very low, given that upside, people are willing to invest. So that's where I come from. That is my framework at present to assess ICOs. If you see something that I missed, please email me. I will have this posted to the conference website But that's essentially what I do in my course and outside of my course when people contact me. So these are my projects from 2018 and 2017, and all of my course materials are on the internet in public HTML, and this slide gives you the links to my syllabus topics, as well as the blockchain lab at Duke University. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much.